Federal and state authorities abandon Western North Carolina, leaving residents with little more than excuses. Congressional bathroom policy could topple decades of radical feminism, and Donald Trump may be able to deliver retribution for the Freedom Convoy truckers against Trudeau's Canadian government. We have those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to The Chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Tuesday, November 26th. The North Carolina National Guard is no longer assisting with Western North Carolina and the Hurricane Helene recovery efforts. Now, their social media page, if you looked at that, would make you think otherwise. Take a look. This is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze News, Steve Baker, our investigative journalist for Blaze News, and JP Decker. He's the executive director of Mercury One. So, JP, let's start with you. You were in North Carolina last week. Let us know an update and things that you saw there on the ground.
Yeah, we hadn't been here probably for about 7 weeks. You and I were there not too long after the hurricane hit, and then we've had partners and other volunteers there. And Steve will speak to this too. The devastation is still there. Nothing has really changed in regards to some of those buildings in Asheville or Black Mountain. It's still there. I mean, 20 to 30 piles tall, feet tall of debris. And just think about the mindset of the locals that are there and of the kids who have to drive through that every single day. I mean, that weighs on you. We saw it in Lahaina. And so, just to drive through there, I ended up going to Relief, North Carolina, and driving up there took about an hour and a half. And to see the devastation all along the way, it's just the impact of this. I don't think we still fully know. And the fact that FEMA is posting videos like that, when I was there was no FEMA, there was no National Guard. I think there was, I don't even remember seeing the Red Cross there, but there's other amazing nonprofits there. Obviously, Mercury One's there. We plan on being there for a very long time. But, I think just being there again and seeing the devastation is still there. It's shocking.
So you didn't hear inspiring movement and music and see these people moving things around?
No, sure didn't. Didn't see any of that. In fact, it was the everyday person who was standing in the gap and doing what the government should have been doing.
But one of the new bright, shiny things that you did see in downtown Asheville, they were opening a new public bathroom. It's open 24/7 for the homeless people. JP, it came with a price tag of $400,000.
$400,000, and it was funny. I actually saw the tweet from Matt, who's on Twitter. You've probably seen him. He's there in North Carolina, and it said, I mean, look at that thing. It was $400,000, and most of the businesses there said they created it so that it would cover up the drug problem that's there, because there's a major drug problem in Asheville. But seeing this, knowing that the funds that were, there was COVID funds, and it was used to build this, and they did a big presentation, and I happened to just be driving through Asheville at the time and drove right past it. It was just shocking to me, yet again, just even the local government. This shows how important it is, the local government elections are, when you have people who are willing to do something like this, and when there's people that are suffering and living in tents. It's hard to fathom that that's happening in our own country.
It's unbelievable. And amen to that. I mean, if there's one thing anyone listening to this takes away, it's to remember that no one's going to come to save you. Your local officials are very, very important. But let's speak to how the people of Western North Carolina have been abandoned with you guys by the National Guard. Steve, you and Joe Hanneman have this piece out at theblazenews.com, which is a story in itself, right? How the process of putting together that article, in which you explained that they have pulled all their members out of that part of the state, even though we see these clips on social media.
It was very difficult to actually listen to the spokespersons as they stuttered, admitting to me, as we called them, because we called the public affairs officers of the 18th Airborne, who was there when I was there at Savage Freedoms for 3 weeks. We made relationships with these people and became very friendly with them. We were seeing each other every day. We were going out to the disaster relief site, like relief that you were talking about, JP, where utter devastation, going out with their dog teams, going out with their people, helping recover bodies and also help removing debris and clearing people's property, mucking out their buildings to whatever extent those buildings remained. And then to see these forces removed and these help. Look, I get very emotional about this. It's almost hard for me to talk. Normally, I don't have a hard time speaking about this because there's so much that is so overwhelming about this. And when I drove through last week, like JP did, and I drove over 100 miles through the most devastated areas in the western part of the state, and mile after mile after mile, tent after tent after tent, where people won't leave their property because they're afraid they're going to lose it if they leave. And so they're staying in these tents. And you see houses up in trees, 30 feet up in trees above the current water line. And not one military vehicle, not one troop on the ground again. So by the time I got to Dallas last week, I started making those phone calls, started calling the public affairs officers. Yes, you're right, Mr. Baker, we withdrew. And then you call the National Guard. That's correct, we withdrew. You call another higher up and you get the stuttering, and they refer you to somebody else higher up. And then we call FEMA. I'm communicating with FEMA all day today as they're trying to answer some of our questions.
Did they give you any excuses why they're no longer there?
No.
Did they even try?
No. And when we ask why that's the end of it. There is no answer because there is no logical answer. We're talking about the best equipped, best trained, most professional organization in the world is the United States Army in terms of what the assets that they have to bring to bear. Just the National Guard in North Carolina alone has 3 battalions of engineers never employed in Western North Carolina.
I just want to throw this out here because is it in this process, after you and Joe started asking questions, this thank you letter was posted, right? November 25th. Let me read this. I mean, so they asked, did everyone leave? Can you just verify if everyone left? And then this letter was posted that said, this joint task force rescued over 865 people, delivered over 22,000 tons of relief supplies, yada, yada. And it's sort of a thank you for everyone who's been out here. But you say that was sent November 21st to the troops as a thank you. Right. And then they were gone, and they just posted that the 25th. So they've been out for a while, and no one's talking about it?
We tracked their social media. We tracked the North Carolina National Guard social media all day on Saturday and Sunday. They were putting up fresh posts, fresh photos that had never been posted before, with the titles and the description of the photos, implying that they were still doing the work. And in fact, up until this new letter was posted, their pinned post said that we're not going to leave you, that we are on a no-fail mission, and we will not leave until this mission is complete. But they were sent home on the 19th. And then that letter was posted yesterday, and I believe that was in response to the pressure campaign that we began on them. But more importantly, they gave themselves away because they were showing and posturing themselves as still being and doing the job, but they were showing us photos of trees still green. The leaves, but that's not the situation in Nashville
There's snow
anymore.
on the ground.
There's snow on the ground, and the leaves are gone.
This is how it works. I'm glad that you were there to just bring us this news, and Mercury One as well. I know Suzanne is currently there. I just want to get back to the people that are there. Still need housing, right? There is temporary housing. They're trying to do things there. I know Mercury One is part of that and helping to put people up in hotels. But what is the real life situation still for a lot of these people?
I mean, Steve, you saw this last week. You just said it. The tents are, I mean, just think about this. It was, when I was there, I think it dropped down to about 30 degrees. The wind was coming in, that was blowing in the snowstorm that they just had. And it was extremely cold. And myself, and many others were trying to find some housing for a lot of these people. But like you said, many are still scared of leaving their property. We've seen it before where property is being taken away from these landowners, and they're afraid that it might happen again. And so that's where we are trying to find mobile homes. We're trying to find RVs, anything, but we're also looking to long-term building as well. There's a lot that's going on there.
So what do they need, and how is Mercury One helping? What can we still do?
Yeah, I mean, if you give to Mercury One at mercury1.org, 100% of the donation goes downrange. And what we're doing right now is finding solutions for the long term. The short term of tents, it's not gonna last come January, because January they're going to have more snowstorms. And so we're looking at RVs. We're looking at how to provide for these people who are in the RVs already. We're looking at mobile homes. We're looking at some prefab homes that'll go in some of these areas, but also we want to contract with the local community in North Carolina so that we can help try to bring some of the money back in to the state.
Steve, final thoughts?
Well, my final thoughts are that we're going to find out why they were pulled out. Now, I have an idea. We were taught long ago, when we don't have an answer, you follow the money. And there's about to be billions and billions of dollars coming in from the federal government into North Carolina, and that's going to be going into the hands of the prime contractors. So we've got to find out where those relationships are, because, quite frankly, those contractors don't want the Army doing the work for free.
Well, gentlemen, thanks for coming in and continuing to expose the truth and continuing to help people there. Go to mercury1.org if you want to help. When we come back, our next guest will explain how feminism is putting women in danger and what Republicans can do to stop it. Next. This Christmas, don't settle for anything less than the best on your table or under your tree. Good Ranchers is here to bring you the gift of high-quality, 100% American meat, and that's sure to make your holiday unforgettable. Right now, during their Christmas special, you can subscribe to any of their boxes of meat or seafood and get a free 10-pound spiral-cut ham to complete your feast. Whether it's for your family gathering or as a gift, this is the kind of holiday cheer that everyone will love. And while we're talking about gifts, Good Ranchers is having a brand new gifting page, because who wouldn't want a box of premium steaks or surf and turf delivered right to your door? There's no stress, no guesswork. It's just amazing food that's guaranteed to impress. This Christmas, skip all the lines at the grocery store and give the gift a flavor that you can trust. Visit goodranchers.com. Use my code Jill to claim your free spiral cut ham while supplies last, and make this holiday truly special with Good Ranchers. Goodranchers.com. American meat delivered. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson had to clarify the protection of female-only spaces in Congress after Representative Nancy Mace vowed to prevent Representative-elect Tim McBride, who now goes by Sarah, from using the women's bathrooms. But how did this whole fight over bathrooms start in the first place? Our next guest thinks it actually started with fighting for women's rights. Mary Rook is the author of the Daily Caller column, and she joins us now to discuss this. So, Mary, take us through your argument, and how did this whole thing then start with women's rights?
I've been thinking about this for a really long time, just trying to break down the fight for feminism or the fight for women's spaces and figure out what this has done to our society. And one of the major things that I've come up with is the fact that it's born and bred transgenderism. So essentially what I've found is that because of feminism and its fight to erode the distinction between the sexes, there's no longer a protected space for either one. And when you can't protect men's spaces, there's no one then to protect female spaces. And I think that got lost along the way, especially in the conversation. So I think that if our society can go back to a time whenever common sense and respect and understanding of the dignity between the sexes can then become like the focus of the conversation, then we can bring it back around where women don't have to fight this hard to keep men in dresses out of our bathrooms, out of our locker rooms, out of our spaces where our teenage daughters are going to be going to change or play sports. I think this is just the insanity that we're at right now because we've no longer allowed men to come in and protect us.
We had Orrin McIntyre making some of these points. It's just a really interesting moment because, can you speak a little bit about how the fact that, of all people, Nancy Mace is the one pushing the bill, and yet you point out as well, there's some contradictions going on here.
Yeah, I think the thing that I found that was so wild about this is that whenever you dig into her history, she was the one that fought to tear down this space for men. She is the first graduate of the Citadel, which is a military college over there in the South. And, she uses this as a point of pride for her. Look at me. I was able to break down this door of sexism. I was able to break down this door of misogyny. And here I am now being able to stand here and fight for women. But what she doesn't understand is that her fight was not against sexism and misogyny. In fact, what her fight actually did was remove spaces where men can be formed that are just their own. And that is such an important part of our society. And I think that we're also seeing that bleed into the military as we talk about men in the military and women in the military and how they interact with each other, especially with the nomination of Pete Hegseth coming on board. I was looking into that, and I think it's just an insane reality that we're living in, where we have to say, actually, men and women are not the same. They can't compete for the same exact jobs because men are different. They are stronger. They are faster. They are more violent. And so they are more capable of being in the military. And so, no, your push into the Citadel actually removed their ability to form themselves in a way that could make them effective military officers because, as we all know, women need a space of their own in order to be able to perfect their feminism and their feminine quality of their life. And men need exactly that same. So when we're talking about Nancy Mace, I never want to, dissuade her or push her off the chase of this because it's such an important fight, especially for families that have children. However, it is also just as important to recognize the fact that her fight is what brought in Sarah McBride into her bathroom.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was a former sports reporter. And so as a female, we would be there in the NBA locker room with all the guys as they were changing. And I was always wondering, why does this have to be done in the locker room while they're in towels or sometimes not even? Right?
Yeah.
It's a very strange situation to be in, but that was the job. Now, I'm a millennial and I came up with the girl boss era, right? We were taught that was what you should be. This is what you should strive for.
Anything you can do, I can do better.
Exactly. And how does that add up in this phrase as well, in this time frame now that we're looking at?
I think that has been one of the most damaging thing to women is this girl boss era, because I'm the same. I'm a millennial, and I was definitely told, don't ever let a man hold you down. Don't ever let a man stop you from doing what you need to do. And I think that is so toxic because what it does is it pits men and women against each other, as opposed to saying you are partners in this life. So what you do to benefit him, he can do to benefit you. Instead of going about it in that type of relationship way, now we're saying you're enemies. And you must fight one another all the time, constantly. And I think that that's why you see this breakdown in marriage. I think that's why you see this breakdown in the bathroom situation. And I think that what we need to be doing going forward, generations like ours, that we're kind of lost. There's a group of women out there, we saw that in this election, who will vote for these kind of feminist female rights. But I think that these younger generations, as we are raising our daughters, as we are raising our sons, we need to explain to them that, yes, there is a difference in the sexes. However, there is not a difference in the sense that y'all have to be enemies. There is a difference in the sense that y'all are complement each other. And that is a divinely created difference that we should embrace and we should promote above all other things, because this life is a balance. And without that balance, we get this society that we're in right now where Mike Johnson has to come out and say, I'm sorry, but you're a man and you can't be in the female bathroom.
It is. I mean, I know a lot of people out there feel the same way. It's cliche, but it is, like you said, just we have to talk about this, really, but we really, really, really do. So when it comes to the solution, you said something interesting earlier about a sort of positive promotion of the dignity or the virtues of men and women as being the answer. Can you say more about that? I mean, the way in which we should be talking about these things and pushing forward. So it is a positive vision of what men and women are and how they should work together.
We went through this same kind of period where we talked about toxic masculinity and how dangerous it was for men to be strong and how dangerous it was for men to be leaders. And I think that there is an important thing that we have to talk about in that men are great. Just as a general baseline, if women are great, then men are great. And we have to be able to talk about that freely and openly. And men have to be able to express themselves in a masculine way in our society again, or we're going to continue to get these situations where women are unsafe. I mean, if you look at the Michael Penny situation in New York, he did the exact right thing. He's on the subway car, he sees all these people being threatened by this man, and he takes action. And what does New York do to him? They try and demonize him, promote the idea of toxic masculinity, try and take him down. But what we need to be doing in our society is raising those people up as heroes. I wrote about it at the time, and one of the things that I thought was, there was a time in our country where we would have given him the key to the city. We would have raised him on our shoulders, had a parade for him, and thanked him for his service for what he did for those people in that car. And now he's in a jail cell. Now he's in a courtroom. Now he's fighting for his life. And I think that in order to move forward, we have to start talking realistically about this stuff and stop viewing it through this feminist lens of women are great and we have to promote them above all else. And men need to take a second or a step back. And I think that once we kind of put everybody back on that level playing field, which is where it always was, feminists like to believe that they were stuck in the kitchen, barefoot and pregnant, demonized. But in reality, they were praised above all else. When you think about your family, you think about what your mother did, the holidays that she made. I mean, we have Thanksgiving around the corner. I talked about this today. All the recipes I'm making are from my grandmother, my great-grandmother, my mother. These are the things that are being passed down from generation. Legacy isn't just for men. It's just a different type of legacy, and it's just as beautiful and honorable as what men have given us. And I think that as long as women can embrace that and really push that forward, then our society can do that course correction that is very, very much needed.
Now, Gen Z is becoming young adults now, and it seems to me, and tell me if you agree with this or not, but the Gen Zers that are out there, if they're based, they are completely based, right? We saw the frat boys at, I believe it was North Carolina, that were putting the flag back up. They're like, you're not doing that, you know what, here. And it seems like they understand the gender roles, right? They want to be women if they are women. They want to be feminine women. They want to be, returning to like nature and homemaking and like literally everything that our grandmas would have done.
Yeah.
Gen Z is out there going, we are going to reclaim this now.
Absolutely. And you know what I thought was so interesting is that as soon as the frats started rising up, putting their American flags out, showing their masculinity, being that kind of trailblazer in society that we used to see a lot, all of a sudden the sorority started flipping. I saw a ton of videos where they would go and ask these frat guys, who are you voting for in this election? And then they would say Trump. And then the girl next to him would be like, oh my gosh, this really cute guy is saying Trump. Now I've got to say Trump, And so I think that is the beautiful, natural way of course correcting. If men stand up, reclaim their masculinity, reclaim their leadership in our society, then women follow suit because we want to match. We want to be that naturally, inherently inside us. We want to be that complement to them. And so I think that was such a beautiful example. I know a lot of people kind of laughed at that and brushed it off, but I saw this as like, okay, thank God my 4 girls will have someone later in their life to look up to, and it won't just be this guy who's going to crumble and fall when the first, instance of danger comes around them. Because I'm raising strong matriarchal women, as all women should, but they're also going to want to look for a man who understands his masculinity, who understands his role in the family, and takes up that sword.
Amen to that. What cracks me up about this debate now is when it comes to the old school men versus women stuff, it's always, what more do you want? I mean, I think a lot of young men feel this way. Women do better, right? More of them go to school. They do better in the workforce. Yeah. And then they're being told that they're terrible. And I think the main thing is to not only have them speak out, but make sure they're not bitter about it. Like give them positive ways to be who they are. Because there's a lot of bitterness on the part of young men for good reason, because they look around and say, what are you even talking about? If you're born in 2000, you're looking around at all the statistics like, why do we have to help women? They're doing better than men in every category, right? And that can be a problem. And so if we don't get back to this, I think, we're going to be in trouble. But I see the same positive trends with a lot of people out there.
Give us a final thought, a closing argument, if you will, of how we should actually start reclaiming some of this and how we should look at this going into the future.
I think that just as much negativity from the feminism side of our world is the same thing that we're getting from that kind of conservative red pill era for men. So women have feminism, men have red pill. And in both of those, like you said, there's bitterness. We have to let that go. We have to say, okay, from this moment on, we are going to go about life looking at the beauty of what God has given us, looking at the beauty of the balance between the sexes, and understand that I'm looking for a partner that believes the same thing I do. And how am I going to fight for her? How am I going to fight for him? And how am I going to fight for this couple together? And so I think that as we're going forward, the first step is to attack the transgender issue head on, which comes through feminism, and understand that as long as we stop pitting the sexes against each other, as long as we stop putting women over men and put it back on that balanced playing field, I think that our society will then eventually just correct itself, as we're already seeing with the frats and the sororities.
I love it. This is the silver lining for the bathroom story, that we can take this and we can learn from this and we can do good from it. Mary, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
When we come back, we'll explain why Trump can deliver a big win for truckers in both Canada and the United States. Stay tuned. The dust has now settled on the presidential election, and it might feel like a moment to breathe, but this is no time to let your guard down. The forces that are trying to suppress the truth, they haven't stopped. If anything, they're doubling down. So now more than ever, we need to stand firm and push harder and make sure that the truth has a voice. Our independent platform is your ally in this fight. We're offering fearless political analysis, real stories like North Carolina, and a dose of healthy camaraderie to keep us grounded. But we can't do it alone. We need you to help us with this battle, because together we can push back against the lies and champion the principles that make America great. If you haven't joined us already, now is the time. Become a Blaze TV member today and gain access to the arsenal of truth that we've built just for you. This is your home. This is your family. We are the front lines now for the ongoing fight for freedom and integrity. And the next chapter starts right now. So go to blazetv.com/Jill and get $30 off. If you love the show, support what you love with Blaze TV and what it stands for. And this is your chance to get even more involved with something special. It's blazetv.com/Jill for $30 off. The trucking industry is sounding the alarm on wasteful spending and broken policies. And one trucker is taking his fight straight to Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Doge. Gord McGill, he's a career truck driver and author of the Autonomous Truckers Substack. And he joins us now to break down his powerful open letter on theblaze.com and what needs to change to fix America's trucking system. So, Gord, thanks so much for joining us. Can you give us a quick overview of just some of the major issues right now in the trucking industry?
Oh, there's so many, and they've been ongoing for so long. I'll stick to the ones that are in the piece, and specifically my recommendations to Doge. You opened with saying that the industry is speaking out about this. I'd say I'm a bit more of a dissident voice in that, because the industry, writ large, has become very dependent on the government for money in something I refer to as a stealth corporate welfare scam that sort of advertises itself as a jobs program. They've been complaining about a shortage of truck drivers for decades now, and that shortage is completely and utterly manufactured, does not exist. And the claim to it has caused more problems than people really understand.
Unbelievable. There's so many interesting things in this letter, which I encourage people to go read at the Blaze. Can you talk a little bit about what you call modern day slavery and its relationship to what's going on?
Right. So America and, the sort of West writ large has got a problem with sort of illegal immigration and various flavors of migrants. The United States and Canada are no different. And many of those people have got into the trucking industry, sometimes involuntarily. There was a major sort of indentured servitude scam identified in one of Canada's major newspapers about 5 years ago, where truck drivers, peasants actually from India, were brought to Canada, claimed to be truck drivers, but they weren't, sent to a sort of two-bit truck training school, given licenses without having any comprehensive understanding of the English language or even how to drive, and then sent out over the Rocky Mountains and over to the eastern side of the continent. This sort of practice is replicated in the United States. Sometimes it's legal with the use of, I believe they're called EB3 visas, but there are some operators out there who are really blatant about this, and they bring migrants here, be it from Eastern Europe, Central America, parts of Asia, and no work visa, no license, no understanding of English, and they just throw them in trucks and send them down the road. It's one of these trends that's like anecdotal. You can sort of see it. There's news articles about it here and there, but no one's actually dove deep into the issue to try and understand how widespread this problem is. And as I said in the letter, that's sort of downstream of the sort of like, woke ideology where we're not allowed to criticize immigration policies. We're not allowed to criticize anyone based on where they're from. And then sometimes those people get abused for commercial purposes.
So we know there are government inefficiencies absolutely everywhere. So what do you want to see Doge do with this in particular?
Well, I would like to see Doge look to cut the fat out of all of this money that goes into CDL mills, which is sort of our vernacular for truck driving schools. There's nearly 10 million people in America who already have a CDL. There's only about 3 million trucking jobs between long haul and running local. The industry needs to ask itself why it goes through so many people. Soon to be unemployed Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg knows this. He has confirmed that at least 300,000 truck drivers quit every year. There's statistics showing that 450,000 new CDLs are issued every single year in America. Nobody ever seems to ask where they're going or why. And a great deal of that is subsidized by the taxpayer. And then we end up getting like people that maybe shouldn't be in trucking, who maybe aren't the best people. And rookies show up higher in accident statistics. So like these costs are offloaded onto the motoring public, onto insurance companies, and nobody even understands it as such, that it's this corporate welfare complex.
Gordon, you know that right now, in fact, Blaze has a documentary out with Stu on the FAA and problems in hiring when it comes to airplanes. And people have talked about that issue, but what you point out here is something that'd be much more dangerous for people on the road statistically would be if there were incompetence in truck driving through subsidies and a lack of excellence on the road. I mean, this would be far more dangerous than what's going on with airplanes. Is that right?
Right. Well, everyone likes to quote the fact that you're far less likely to be involved in an aircraft incident than you are driving. Like you're statistically way more likely to be involved in an incident on the road. That's proven. And that goes up when there are people on the road who've gotten their license issued either by a dodgy truck driving school or by a DMV that's been infiltrated by bad actors. A friend of mine wrote an article about this once and how a DMV in California was caught having issued 300 CDLs with no record of any of those people ever having done a road test. They just gave them out. And like this has happened in a few different places. And, the regulatory bodies, such as the FMCSA, are doing what I call rearguard action. They're busy like farting around with electronic logging devices and focusing on all of these sort of after problems rather than focusing on keeping bad actors out of the industry in the first place.
We have about 90 seconds left. And in the time that we have left, you have another piece up on the Blaze right now. And you wrote that Trump may be able to help Canada's Freedom Convoy prisoners. So give us an update on what Trump can do to help them.
Well, as we know, President Trump is said to be pardoning those folks who were, unlawfully and unjustly incarcerated for extended periods of time, just simply for, trespassing or protesting at the January 6th protest. Canada has a similar problem. There are many people in Canada still going through the court system, still being persecuted by the regime of Justin Trudeau. Two gentlemen in particular who've been in prison now for almost 3 years on politically trumped up charges, Crown prosecution that was malicious, and a judge who kind of worked fast and loose in order to keep those guys in jail longer than they should have been there. And I believe President Trump should be able to show Justin Trudeau that he has to clean up his own mess if he wants to continue working with America.
Gord, thank you so much for this. I mean, we're going to do our best to make sure that President Trump, Vivek, and Elon all hear this message.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for joining us, Gord. Thanks so much for getting this message out there as well.
Cheers. Thank you.
When we come back, the 2024 election might be over, but the fight for election integrity is not. We'll highlight some of the critical Supreme Court cases just ahead. The Pennsylvania Senate race was finally called last week when Democrat Bob Casey conceded. The Democrats were attempting to count ballots that had no date or the wrong date, but luckily the Supreme Court sided with the RNC in this case. So how do we stop these election mishaps from happening? Here to discuss is Cleta Mitchell. She's a senior legal fellow for the Conservative Partnership Institute. So Cleta, what should be the plan to revamp American elections?
Well, hello. Thank you for having me. I've been thinking about this and talking with our election integrity leaders across the country. And I think we're sort of coming to the view that what we need is a voters' election integrity Bill of Rights, because these crazy laws are really infringing on the voting rights of people who go to the polls, do it right, or if you're going to get to vote by mail, that you've signed your name, you date it. But all of this post-election receipt of ballots being dumped. California, I think, is still counting ballots. The idea that they cannot process the ballots before Election Day, or, look, a lot of states like Florida, like North Carolina, process absentee ballots before Election Day. All that means is that they make sure that all of the requirements are met. And then once the polls close on Election Day, then they tabulate those ballots. That's what should be the rule everywhere. And we should not have the situation of people sending in ballots 2 weeks, 3 weeks after Election Day. So I think that there are a number of principles that we're sort of coalescing around that need to be both in federal law and in state law. Only citizens vote. Voter ID for every kind of voting. Make sure that all ballots are received by the time the polls close on Election Day. Make sure that there's transparency and accountability, that if there are certain kinds of election technology that people are very distrustful of, maybe Congress should appropriate the money like it did after the 2000 presidential election to say, get rid of those things, get rid of those touch screens, get rid of anything that has a modem that can be remotely accessed. Have paper ballots hand marked, and any kind of technology needs to be able to be manually replicated. So you know that the tabulator is counting the number of ballots that are in your hand that were put into the tabulator. We've got to set some principles that are part of the law everywhere. And I think Congress needs to do that, and every state needs to do that. This situation needs to be corrected. It's time. It's way past time to do that.
I think that's such a great idea. I just know so many people in our audience are very much willing to hear those words, grab those principles, and go out and do something, because, as you've also been saying on Twitter, you got to do it. Like the voters have to do the work, and if you care about it, you need to take the sort of thing that Cleta and all her people are going to give you, and then go out and do it. Now, let's get a quick update on Illinois, though, because there's a great example of a place where, what is it, up to 14 days, is it there, right? Allows mail-in ballots to come in 14 days after the election. Judicial Watch just, is petitioning on this. And do you think that this is something where the Supreme Court or the courts might ultimately decide in the right direction? It seems so egregious, but people are now, they're kind of used to it, right? In our corrupt system, allowing these mail-ins to come in after the fact.
Well, that's an interesting question. And yet you mentioned Judicial Watch has filed suit in both the Illinois and also Mississippi. And the Fifth Circuit ruled that receiving ballots after the time the polls close on Election Day violates the federal statute that says Election Day for federal elections, and it says day, is the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. And so I think that one of the things that we need to do is to say that there's a beginning and an end when we as a country vote pretty much at the same time. And I think part of that would be, we might have to make some accommodation for people to vote in person early if they're going to be out of state. I think we need to get rid of this universal vote by mail, this universal sending of ballots to people, whether they requested them or not. Nevada has that law. There are tens of thousands of bad registrations in Nevada. People out in Nevada, the volunteers have confirmed that the Democrat Secretary of State would not do anything to try to clean the voter rolls. And every one of those people received a ballot sent to that address, whether they asked for it or not, which means you've got all of these ballots just floating around, and there's really no way to oversee the processing, the verification. It's time to stop the nonsense and the madness. So I think that that's got to be one of the principles, this idea of curing ballots. Do you know how many people touch an absentee ballot once it leaves your hand? I think if people had any idea how many people were looking at, interpreting, deciding whether or not to accept, or interpreting how somebody intended to vote, people would not want. That's one of those sausage making things. I think people would say, you know what, I think I'll just go vote in person. But I just think we have to say it is time for all of us as Americans to say our election system is broken. Let us fix it. Yes, we won some races. We lost some races. That's not what this is about. This is about how after 2020, so many thousands of people came out of their homes and started looking at the laws, looking at voter rolls, looking at all these procedures. So now we have tens of thousands of experts, citizen experts. I think it's time that we put that expertise to work and say to the states and to the Congress, do your job, make our elections work properly for everyone. That's what we need to be about the business of doing, I think.
Real quick, yes or no. Is your org going to do look back on 2020 after all the votes are counted this time?
I was talking to some people about that today. A lot of our people have already done look backs. It's just never been pulled together. If anybody, there are a lot of pieces there already that no one's been willing to look at. There are some things like in Fulton County in Georgia, where there were literally hundreds of thousands of ballot images destroyed, which is a violation of state and federal law. So there's some deterioration of the evidence. But sure, I do think that what needs to happen is to pull together all the things that so many people have done, but which the left-wing media, of course, has refused to even consider. There's a lot of good work that is would form the basis of a pretty good look at what happened in 2020.
That's absolutely right. And I'm sure that everybody would still be very interested to see that Cleta Mitchell, our election integrity queen. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
You too, Cleta. When we come back, we'll be right back to wrap up the show. Stay with us. We've had quite the show, and I feel like, Matthew, today was one of the shows that we've had that really dives into the fact that we're here just trying to talk about the things that nobody else is still really talking about on the legacy media, right? You're not going to get everything from North Carolina and feminism and the transgender issue and go all the way through election integrity and then even just a little bit of the trucking industry that's there at the very end of the show today. But it's a good summation of what we're able to do here at Blaze TV.
No, I'm just thinking it's a privilege to be able to do this. I mean, first off, North Carolina, I mean, Steve said this the other day, like we're, can I say this on air? We're being given stuff by people who've been shut out of the usual mainstream sources that they provide information to because no one's interested in talking about the plight of these people as winter falls and the National Guard, whose job it is to build things when, public roads are down, is not doing anything in a disaster. That's unfathomable. It's terrible what's happening in America, but it's great to at least be able to have on JP Decker, have on, Steve come on here and speak to it.
Well, it's unfortunate because Hurricane Helene is no longer trendy and in the headlines. That's why they move on from it and they find the next best thing that they think that, of course, they think that they're serving their audience, but are they really, when there are Americans out there that are hurting, that don't have running water, that are living in tents with snow on the ground?
Yeah, no, exactly. And this is like the next thing we had on the show, right? Mary Rook coming on and talking about the transgender bathroom issue in Congress, which I think everyone kind of on our side, quote unquote, can admit the Congress should not have men and women's bathrooms. This is crazy. But again, so that is kind of trendy, right? To talk about that is certainly an issue, and it's a good thing Nancy Mace is bringing it up and forcing these guys to actually stand on their principles in Congress. But what not as many people are talking about is, well, how did we get here, right? And she presents some interesting ideas about that.
And I love it. I think that's a good Thanksgiving dinner table conversation if you're willing to go there with your family.
If you're willing to go there.
Feminism and the idea of it, and just, you don't have to be the girl boss in the way that things are going now.
It's kind of this, she presented it as kind of this chip on the shoulder, right? That it starts with this sort of grievance. That women have to be better than men or as good as men at all things. And it's just interesting to me that Nancy Mace, who was all about going into men's spaces, right, is now saying, no, I need to defend women's spaces. Obviously, they're two different things. There's plenty to argue about. But it's very interesting that she brings that up. And I don't think a lot of other people are talking about this.
And Gord McGill has struck a chord with our audience. His piece today was going crazy online. So many people were reading that. And that's one of the reasons why we're like, oh, man, people are very interested in this. We want to talk to him and get his take. But it is something that affects everybody's daily life when it comes to trucking.
Yeah, I mean, here's the vital thing that everyone needs in the day of Amazon is you got to have people deliver stuff to you from all across, move goods and services, and that's the basis of the modern world. It's an engine that runs our economy, and we take that for granted at our peril. But what is so great about this is, here is Gord McGill, this Canadian trucker who, I've kind of followed a little bit for a while, and so is Matt Himes, who I think brought in the piece, writing an open letter that we were able to platform, writing another piece about how Trump can help that convoy, that those brave guys up in Canada. And we're able to platform him and hopefully get him in front of Elon and Vivek and Doge, because these are the kinds of people that we actually need to hear from, who know what's going on, experience it, and can tell the rest of us what should be done.
And Elon put a post on X today, and it was a clip of a Joe Rogan segment. And he says to all government employees, what have you done this week?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes.
And I put that out there
Yes.
on X, and I said, be still my heart, because if
Yes.
you want to know
Yes.
what is going to just get me all excited here, it's cutting waste from the government and trying to make them more efficient. That's it right there. It's not that hard.
Oh, yeah.
It is hard because they're terrible at doing it, but I have hope.
Oh, yeah. This is Mark Andreessen was on with Rogan. And Mark Andreessen, an incredible mind of his own, and VC, venture capital legend. So, in tech, and they're just all laughing because they know that Elon will do this. I mean, Elon will do the same thing he did everywhere else. What do you get done this week? Now, they're going to find out that it's a little harder to fire government employees than it is private ones, but they're going to figure out how to get around it.
If anyone can do it,
We're going to do it.
Elon can do it. He's been hanging out with Trump at Mar-a-Lago this whole time. He won't go anywhere. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast, and we'll see you back here tomorrow night.